Welcome back to ABA Chapter Chat.
Great to be back.
Today, we're taking a close look at Chapter 10 of Applied Behavior Analysis for Teachers. It's all about antecedent control, differential reinforcement, and shaping.
Yep, the real fundamentals.
Now, you might think, okay, basics, but honestly, there's always, nuance there. Mastering these is just so key for effective practice.
Absolutely. It's easy to gloss over them sometimes, but really getting these foundations solid helps us be so much more thoughtful and effective in what we do.
Right. So our mission today, let's unpack these ideas, keep the language simple, use examples you actually see, and talk about applying it day to day.
And maybe touch on some of those challenges we all run into.
Okay, so Chapter 10 kicks off talking about antecedent influences. That's all the stuff that happens before behavior.
Right. And usually we think about the immediate trigger, right? What happened right before.
Yeah, that's the traditional focus.
But the chapter really emphasizes something else too.
Yeah.
Setting events. These are more like background conditions.
Okay, setting events. Tell me more.
There are things outside the immediate moment that can make a behavior more or less likely. Think environmental stuff, physiological things, even social factors.
That makes a lot of sense, like a student who didn't sleep well.
Exactly. That lack of sleep, that's a physiological setting event. It doesn't cause the tantrum maybe, but it makes it way more likely they'll be cranky and, act out.
So as practitioners, what do we do about something like poor sleep? We can't control bedtime.
Well, the chapter suggests looking broader. Maybe it's a conversation with parents about routines. It's about seeing those outside factors.
They had that example, too, about menstrual discomfort being a setting event. And providing pain relief actually reduced challenging behavior.
Mm-hmm. It highlights that sometimes there are physical reasons we need to consider. Simple as that.
And environmental setting events, like task avoidance.
Yeah, maybe a student avoids work because they haven't gotten much reinforcement for it before. So the chapter mentions non-contingent reinforcement.
Giving reinforcement before the task, like letting them play a game first.
Exactly. Kind of proactively dealing with that potential hurdle, boosting motivation beforehand.
Interesting. And then there are changes in routine. Less sleep, late bus, those can be triggers too.
For sure. Those are setting events. And the chapter suggests things like, maybe adjusting expectations a bit that day.
Or giving extra attention, preferred activities, more choices.
Right. Based on that Dadson and Horner research, it's about being flexible when you know things are off for a student.
And this all ties back to functional assessment, right?
Yeah.
Chapter 7 stuff. You got to identify these things first.
Absolutely. You can't address what you don't understand. And managing these antecedents, it just creates safer, more supportive environments for everyone.
Okay, moving on. Let's talk stimulus control, how specific cues in the environment come to influence behavior.
Right. And the chapter reminds us about operant versus respondent behavior. Operant is learned.
Respondent is reflexive.
Exactly. And with operant behavior, antecedents don't cause it. They sort of occasion it. It's a learned signal.
Okay, a signal. That brings us to discrimination, right? Learning to respond differently in different situations.
Precisely. It develops because of our history of reinforcement.
So let's break down the key terms, SD and S delta. What's the SD?
The SD, or discriminative stimulus, is the cue that signals reinforcement has been available for a specific response in the past.
Like saying clap and the child claps and gets praised, clap becomes the SD.
Perfect example. And the S delta, that's the cue that signals the same response has not been reinforced.
So if you say wave and the child claps instead and gets no praise, wave becomes an S delta for clapping.
You got it. The SD evokes the response because of that reinforcement history.
It sets the stage.
Exactly. And we see this everywhere. A baby learning mama. A student reading went correctly. Even students acting differently for the math teacher versus the social studies teacher.
Oh, that's a good one. And they warned about us accidentally becoming an SD for problem behavior, right?
Yeah.
By giving it attention.
Yes, that's so important. Even negative attention can sometimes function as reinforcement. We have to be mindful of the signals we're sending.
They briefly mention SDP too, discriminative stimulus for punishment.
Yeah, like maybe the sound of a police siren becomes an SDP for slowing down if you've gotten a ticket before.
Yeah.
It signals punishment might be coming.
Okay. So how do we teach these discriminations actively? That's discrimination training.
Right. Systematically reinforcing the response when the SD is present and not reinforcing it when the S delta is present, like teaching clap versus wave.
But just showing the cues over and over might not be the fastest way, the chapter says.
Definitely not always the most efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And you risk that issue of stimulus over-selectivity.
Where the student focuses on something irrelevant, like a smudge on the card instead of the word.
Exactly. They latch onto one feature and ignore the critical one. It's something you really have to watch for.
Okay, so beyond simple discrimination, there's concept formation. What's that about?
A concept is like a category. It's a class of stimuli that share common features and lead to the same response. Think dog. Lots of different dogs, but they share features, and we learn to label them all dog.
So it involves discriminating based on those common features, forming an abstraction, like red or vehicle.
Precisely. And for basic concepts like colors, we often teach using lots of positive examples, different red things, and negative examples, things that aren't red. Show a red block, say red. Show a blue block, say not red. Reinforce correct identification.
Makes sense. But for concepts you can define, like noun.
For those, especially with learners who have language, we can use rules or definitions. That's often more efficient.
And they touched on stimulus equivalence, too, that complex web of relations.
Yeah, briefly. Learning that picture of bread matches written word bread and spoken bread matches picture of bread might lead to understanding spoken bread matches written bread without direct teaching. It's about those derived relations.
Powerful stuff. Okay, let's shift to prompts. We use them constantly, but we need to be strategic. What's the core definition?
A prompt is an extra cue, basically. It comes after the SD, if the SD alone didn't work, to make the correct response more likely so we can reinforce it.
And the main types are verbal, visual, and physical. Right. Let's start with verbal.
Sure. Verbal prompts can be hints, like it rhymes with cat, or direct instructions, put your name on the top line. Rules can act as verbal prompts, too.
What about that high plow sequence they mentioned for compliance?
Oh, yeah. Behavioral momentum.
Yeah.
You give a few easy instructions, the student is likely to follow high probability requests.
Suit 'em rolling.
Exactly. Then you slip in the one they're less keen on, the low probability request. That momentum often carries them through.
Clever. And self-operated verbal prompts. That sounds useful for independence.
Definitely. Things like recorded instructions for a job task or audio cues in music. The student accesses the prompt themselves.
Great idea. Okay, visual prompts. So many possibilities here.
Oh, yeah. Picture schedules, timers, finished examples of work, number lines, picture cues on materials. The list goes on.
Visual schedules are huge, especially for learners with autism. They make things predictable.
Absolutely. Reduces anxiety, promotes independence once they learn to follow them, and picture cards for communication, requesting, commenting, really powerful.
And for students who read well, written prompts can work too, like scripts for social situations.
For sure. Using their strengths. And video prompts are another big one they mentioned.
Showing someone doing the skill.
Yep. Great for motor skills, functional routines. Seeing it visually can make a big difference. And video self-modeling, too.
Watching themselves succeed. That must be motivating.
It really can be. Peer modeling videos work well, too.
Okay, verbal, visual. What about modeling itself as a prompt? Just showing them.
That's it. Demonstrating the behavior. And many kids develop generalized imitations. They learn that copying gets reinforced.
Do this becomes a cue? But yeah, they imitate the good and the bad.
Huh. Too true. So clear, appropriate models are key. And the chapter notes that models who are similar, competent, and maybe have some status tend to be more effective.
Then there's physical guidance. More hands-on.
Yeah, physically assisting the student. Hand over hand for writing, guiding movements for sports. But importantly, you need the student's cooperation.
Right. And other tactile prompts, like vibrating pagers.
Mm-hmm. A more subtle cue, maybe for staying on task or initiating interaction without being as obvious as verbal or physical guidance.
Okay. Lots of ways to prompt, but the goal isn't prompts forever, right? We need to get rid of them. Fading.
Exactly. Fading is crucial. It's the gradual removal of prompts so the natural SD takes over. And knowing how and when to fade, that's the art.
Too fast leads to errors, too slow leads to dependence. Tricky balance.
It really is.
So what are the main fading methods, most to least?
Right. You start with the most help needed to guarantee success, maybe full physical guidance, and then gradually reduce it as they get better. Like starting with a full definition as a prompt, then just a keyword, then nothing.
And this often leads to errorless learning, right? Making the right answer really obvious at first.
Often, yes. Like making the correct matching card a different color initially, then slowly making the colors the same. It shapes the stimulus. But, there's also an argument that experiencing some errors helps build frustration tolerance.
Good point. Okay, what about graduated guidance?
That's specifically for fading physical prompts, reducing the intensity of the physical help, moving from hand over hand to just a light touch on the wrist, then maybe just shadowing their hand.
Like teaching spoon use,
Exactly.
then time delay, waiting before prompting.
Yep, you give the SD, then wait a set time, maybe 3 seconds, maybe longer as they improve before you give the prompt. Gives them a chance to jump in first.
Okay, and simultaneous prompting. Prompting right away.
With that one, the SD and prompt happen together, ensuring success. You check for learning with separate probe trials where no prompt is given.
Got it. And finally, least to most prompting, starting with the smallest hint.
Exactly, the opposite of most to least. Give the SD, maybe offer just a gesture. If that doesn't work, try a verbal hint. If still no response, maybe model it. You increase the support only as needed. Good for assessing what they can do independently.
That summary chart in the chapter was helpful for keeping these straight, and I loved the analogy of stopping at a red light at 3 a.m., powerful stimulus control.
It really illustrates how strong those learned associations can become, and that's what we want for maintenance and generalization.
And those final guidelines for prompting were great. Focus on the SD, use the weakest effective prompt, fade quickly, and avoid unplanned prompts. That last one.
So easy to do unintentionally. A look, a slight nod. We have to be aware.
Okay, shifting gears again. Teaching complex stuff, behaviors with multiple steps, starts with task analysis.
You got it. Breaking that complex skill down into smaller, teachable steps. It takes practice to get good at task analysis, but it's fundamental for teaching almost anything complex. Getting dressed, solving math problems, making a snack.
Even tricky academic stuff with hidden steps, like long division.
Yeah, they suggest trying to make those internal steps observable at first, maybe having the student talk through it. The goal is just to map out all the components.
That jacket anecdote, feet through armholes, really shows why being specific matters.
Definitely. And the Moyer and Dardig framework helps. Check prerequisites, list materials, list steps in order. Observing a master performer is often the best way to figure out the steps.
Like Miss Cadwallader needing clear steps for the computer. And that serial task analysis in the table was a perfect example.
Yeah, very clear.
So task analysis gives us the steps. How do we link them together? Chaining.
Exactly. The steps become a behavioral chain. Each step needs to happen in sequence, and usually the big reinforcement comes only at the very end.
And each step does double duty, right? Reinforcer for the last step, SD for the next one.
Precisely. Completing one step is reinforcing and signals it's time for the next one. Like following directions to a friend's house, each turn gets you closer and cues the next instruction.
Okay, and the main ways to teach chains. Backward, forward, and total task. Backward chaining.
You teach the last step first. Once that's mastered, you teach the second to last step, leading into the already mastered last step. You work backward from the end. The natural reinforcer is always right there at the end of what they do.
Like teaching spoon feeding first, just the mouth part, then scooping and mouth, etc.
Perfect.
And forward chaining is the opposite. Start at step 1.
Yep. Teach step 1 to mastery, then add step 2, then step 3, always building from the beginning, like teaching undressing, starting with just the zipper.
And total task presentation?
That's where the student tries the whole chain every time, with prompts as needed for any step they can't do yet. Good if they already know some steps, or for certain functional skills, like using a phone.
And when teaching a chain, you still need to think about how you're teaching each link, right? Which prompts to use.
Absolutely. It gets complex, and data collection is key. Tracking which steps are independent, which need prompts, and what kind of prompts. Those data sheets in the chapter are essential for managing it.
Okay, last big topic, shaping. What if the student can't even do the basic components of the behavior, even with prompts?
That's exactly when you turn to shaping. It's differentially reinforcing successive approximations toward a target behavior.
Successive approximations. So rewarding steps that get closer and closer.
You got it. The key elements are differential reinforcement, only reinforcing the better attempts, and a shifting criterion, gradually expecting more before you reinforce.
And how is shaping different from fading? They can seem similar.
Good question. Fading changes the antecedent cue while the behavior stays the same. Shaping changes the behavior itself, often while the cue stays the same. Fading is about the stimulus control. Shaping is about response differentiation. Antecedents versus consequences.
Okay, that helps clarify. So designing a shaping program.
First, define your terminal behavior, the final goal. Then, identify an initial behavior the student can do that's somewhat related, and maybe map out some intermediate steps you expect to see along the way.
And we can shape different aspects of behavior.
Oh yeah. Topography, what it looks like, duration, how long it lasts, latency, how quickly it starts, Rate how often, force, how intense.
Like shaping vocals sounds closer to a word. That's topography.
Exactly. Or coaching sports form. Or shaping duration for staying in seat, like Harold in the example, gradually increasing the time required.
Or shaping latency, getting faster at sight words, or maybe slower for impulsivity.
Right. Shaping fluency, like timed math facts. Even shaping intensity, like voice volume or write pressure.
It seems really flexible.
It is. But often it's most efficient when you combine it with other things, like prompting and fading.
Like that example of teaching letter writing using physical prompts initially, fading them, while also shaping the accuracy of the letter form.
Precisely. They often work hand in hand. That shaping speech video example also showed reinforcing those closer and closer approximations to words.
Wow, okay. We have covered a ton of ground from Chapter 10. Antecedent control, stimulus control, prompts, fading, chaining, shaping.
Really the building blocks. And hopefully hearing it discussed like this helps you see the practical side, how these concepts play out every single day.
Understanding the environment, teaching discriminations carefully, using prompts just right, breaking down tasks, building new skills bit by bit.
It's all crucial. And we acknowledge the challenges too. Identifying setting events, avoiding accidental prompts, getting fading right, doing a good task analysis, figuring out shaping steps. It takes skill.
But the big takeaway, knowing these principles and using them systematically, that's how we create really effective learning environments.
And help our clients gain independence and skills.
So as you go forward, think about that power you have structuring the environment, using reinforcement strategically. How can you use these tools ethically and effectively to really empower the people you work with? Something to reflect on.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.